As Elton mentioned in my bio, I used to work with the states, so I guess that's why I got asked to do this presentation, because I kind of know how they want things said or not said. But before I preface this, these are not set in stone. This is just kind of what we have. We do have a couple that are still in development on the back burner, and certainly open to new talking points moving forward. This is just what we thought we could have coming out right now.
I just want to say that what we have in print now is pretty much cast in concrete for this conference.
Yes.
We don't have time to rewrite it, but we are very open to your suggestions for the next conference, which is going to take place September.
Yep.
In Memphis. So, please don't think we're not being responsive to you, but at this stage, it's unrealistic to think we can rewrite what we're presenting today. But we're very open to your suggestions for the next conference.
Okay, thank you all. All right, and maybe some of the issues that you guys brought up about Canada, we can put on there too, so we can kind of end this whole Canadian bacon thing, right? Gotta make sure it's in French and in English. If you're gonna swear, you gotta say it in both. But, okay, so we got a couple of different titles here: standardized equipment and certification requirements. Basically, the issue is the wide, variances from state to state and, perhaps province to province for equipment requirements. I think we all know that in the room. Keep in mind this presentation is to go to WASHTO in the States as well tomorrow, and members of SENRA. So we all know it ranges from very little requirements, as you said, you pop a light on and you put a broomstick in the front and now you're a height pole, and no. We need a little bit more consistency across the states. But some of the examples is listed here, and I'm not going to read this stuff verbatim. I mean, obviously a copy of this will be available after the meeting. But as we know, cones are different sizes, 18 inches in one state, 36 in another. Flags, where they're put, what color they are, what size. Some of these things that we're bringing up are in the process of going through AASHTO's harmonization. As Elton mentioned, the 50 state officials. The only issue is in some of those states, the people that you deal with is in the DMV, who's not represented by AASHTO, they're represented by AMVA. So one of the things that working with Chris Smith, one of the representatives from AASHTO, is to also extend their harmonization efforts and to include the DMVs in states where the permitting issues are ran by the DMV, like in Virginia, for example, and a couple of the other states. But then also, if the permits are issued, like in the Dakotas, they're issued out of the Highway Patrol and overseen by the DOT. So then maybe we'd want folks coming in there from, CSA or the association that represents the inspectors and some of the public escorts that are required on the permits. So, what we have here, as Elton said, what we put to print for this go around for this conference is that we support the current harmonization efforts. Perhaps they can include some. There's iterations. They're on the second iteration right now, and they're looking for ideas for the third one. So perhaps some of these recommendations could be put into there for states to continue to work on. Because rulemaking in the states can take, a couple of weeks. Some of the states like Minnesota can do an internal policy change. Some of the states like Wisconsin, they have to go through a whole rule change process and go through public comment, etc. And so the thought is that, they get it started, they get working on it, and then you get the next one started, because we didn't want to have it start to end every 2 years, come up with a new set. And they can only handle 3 or 4 or 5 of them at a time. They can't do... It's a state. You know what I mean? They can't turn things around on a dime. It takes a while. So, some of our recommendations here is make the cone requirements uniform, flag color and size and location uniform. One of the considerations is, believe it or not, there's 50 different ways to have an oversized overweight sign on a car. Why don't we just use the red D? You guys are familiar with it? Yeah, that's a cost. That's something else we got to pay for. Probably one of the recommendations to the state is that you phase it in, but we just want to throw it out there. Perhaps they make it a requirement within 18 months so that people can phase into it. It's not something you got to go do tomorrow, or get out your red and white paint and plywood and try and duplicate it offline. But just something to put out there instead of sitting there talking about it has to be this brush stroke, this letter height, this. It's recognized internationally, so why wouldn't we just use it uniformly, especially with all the, transporter movements that are happening that we were just talking about. And then also sign location should be standardized as well. For clarification on the D sign, we're just talking about, what do I do here? The sign itself. I don't know that we want to get into the whole, how the apparatus is set up. We have light bars in the lower 48, but, just the tapestry or the sign itself is where the recommendation, is specifically what the recommendation is offering right now. The other thing, this one is kind of a sensitive issue, and maybe Charlie can weigh in on it from an insurance point of view, but PVO is being required to carry extra signs for the trucks. Each unit should be responsible for their own thing. The pilot car has his or her stuff, the truck driver has his or her stuff, and the chaser, if you have a chaser, etc. It should be germane to the vehicle, because what happens if the truck doesn't have a spare sign or the pilot doesn't have the spare sign, the pilot gets a ticket for the truck. That doesn't make any sense. I don't know why that just happened, but. But in this industry, we know that duct tape works and we can get her done, so we'll just figure it out. So what we're saying is, don't know what the temperature is with SCNRA on this one or not, but everybody should have their own equipment for their own vehicle, and it shouldn't be required that the pilots carry extras. That's a little absurd. Scale house rules. Even within states, rules vary from point of entry or, the border crossing, whatever part of the country you're from, it can be called different things. Scale houses, way stations, enforcement ramps, whatever you want to call them. I mean, they're called different things. One of the things I learned when I was working for a DOT, there's 50 different ways to do the same thing. I mean, every state has to do it their way, right? So there's probably 50 different ways to refer to a way station. But here we're calling them scale houses just for uniformity, to keep with the theme. But the issue is, you can be in one state where they require you to run across the scales on one side of the state. If you imagine you have a load that's carrying through a state and you're not beginning or ending your trip in that state. But on the other side of the state, the scale house is saying don't do it. And if you do it, we're going to cite you for $100. And so, there needs to be some consistency within the states, or at least within the AASHTO regions or districts. If not nationally. It's like you either want us to do it or you don't want us to do it. MPCA doesn't take a position, just asking for consistency. And if you can't figure it out because you're a state, well then put up a sign. Tell us, inform us, so that we, know when we're coming and going with the load, whether you want us to go across or not. So either way, we feel it's an issue that definitely is worthy of their attention. And some of this stuff you may feel like, oh, this is really, big deal. With the states, low-hanging fruit, don't tell them exactly how to write it, because then they can't take credit for it. You just bring it up to their attention and tell them kind of how you want it to come out on the other side, and then you kind of sit back and enjoy the show. Just is what it is. Trust me, 11 years in country. Not like Elton, I didn't do service for their military, and thank you to those that did, but 11 years in state service as a bureaucrat, trying to teach them how the real world works, it was pretty much a challenge every day. So next issue is national certification. Now we've got situations here where you go and you take a class and you can do everything, right? You're certified, you haven't even followed a truck, other than being interested because you saw a load with a bunch of yellow lights go down the road and you got interested in the pilot car industry. So you go sit somewhere for on Saturday for 8 hours, and you can do all of it. Yeah, I can do a route survey. If I tell you to, hook up 2 chickens to it and pull it down the road, you better get going. So we're, as the association, we're really not interested in that. We're kind of more interested in maybe a framework of endorsements. You have your standard pilot car certification, but then you get into steer persons. I say that purposefully because it's not steermen or tillermen. I've seen a lot of women do it just as good. Guys, sorry. So we're going to be politically correct here and say steer or tiller persons. And that we want clarification and standardization across the state. One state, steer means one thing, tiller means another. So again, just like some of the other things we brought up, consistency. This title means this, and it means this throughout the United States and Canada. If we, align forces, We just want uniformity with the terms and definitions and what it means, to eliminate confusion. Also, this is very important. These next 3 slides are very important for the protection of infrastructure, because the next thing you need to do when you're proposing rule changes of the state, you got to tell them why they have to care. Why do I care about this issue? So here, it's to protect the infrastructure, because while we want to do the ride-along program at the same time, if states saw some of the pilot cars that, are throwing together a pull car where they went out to the garage and they broke off the broom handle and taped 3 of those together, and they say, yeah, I'm a height pole. I mean, we say that jokingly, but it happens. I mean, people are just, oh yeah, I just have to have something that taps the bridges, it's leaning backwards, it's leaning forward. Yeah, I can jump on the back of a truck. Well, no, it kind of requires a CDL if you're on the vehicle, but if you're off the vehicle and you have a remote control, then it doesn't require a CDL. So what we're asking for is some uniformity there and some national training and a certification process. It's a graduated program. Now that may lend itself, what about grandfathering? I've already been doing this for 20 years. I'm not going back to, a classroom, damn it. Well, we can talk about that, but we're just saying there should be a tier, especially for, greenhorns that are coming into this. You start out following the truck, you start learning it, you start learning the safety, and you graduate up to these other things. And it's for the good of the industry as a whole. Don't want to limit anybody, but it's important. Height pole operators, again, operators, as this more slide lends itself to people that don't know the different definitions, but you're in front of the load, you're clearing it and verifying clearances, in addition to getting the route surveyed, which we'll talk about in a second. You're there to verify to make sure that nothing is struck. Again, we want a training requirement, so that, in addition to the basic training, you would go back and you do training on pole cars, whether or not that's practical in classroom. Again, that's one of those things that we'd have to talk to the states on, but if one state requires, classroom and field training, we'd ask all of them to do it. Again, consistency, and then you go through a comprehensive exam. This one's a little hard to see. I tried to pare it down, but it's got a lot of things that are going on in the route surveying area, and a lot of things that are near and dear to some of the folks that are really good at this and have that state recognition. And the issue really is that you go out and you do a route survey, and the state says it's only good for 14 days. Well, your load moves on day 17. Resign it, redate it, send it back in. You didn't rerun the route. What's worse is there's people doing this under somebody else's name because this state recognizes their name. So we want some type of certification or some type of a check that the state has, whether it be a notepad, some type of verification, whether it gets, you take it to a notary and you get it certified. If we all have to get a notary, it's really not that hard. It's a money and a stamp thing. But something that embosses that route survey, that it says it did come from, let's say Elton did it. It did come from Elton Boyd. It didn't come from somebody else. And so you're not, lobbing on, to somebody else's route survey. The other issue is Google Earth is not a very good tool, and this comes into my, territory. Google Earth is not going to help you see one wire, not at all. And it's not going to tell you where a roundabout is, because the little bubble car that goes around is every 3 years. So a roundabout could get smacked in there, a new signal pole can get smacked in there, since the bubble car went by. So please do not use Google for route surveys. And so we would like to have language added in there that a windshield survey is the best thing, because things can change. We've had routes that are cleared, somebody drops a power line across there, it gets snagged, but somebody did one of those re-signs on a route survey that I'm talking about. They surveyed it, the loads didn't go for 28 days later, they just resubmitted it, redated it, popped it back in there, and they ended up catching a power line, and $5,000-$10,000 later in fines, somebody's not going to be happy. So just, again, trying to look at not cutting corners. We understand that the carriers may not like this recommendation and may not want to pay for 2 route surveys, but it is what it is. It's better to be safe than sorry. I think we've had a couple of posts on the website where, measure twice, drive once. I think we can all relate to that. Where you find a truck wedged underneath the bridge, it's like, verify. So, finally, what we want is that, these are documents. These are government documents that are required to be submitted, and so there should perhaps be something in the penal code. If somebody submits something under false pretenses, we'd like the states to entertain, some type of a penalty to the people if they catch them doing it. The other, again, I think I bled into this one, but the security route surveys, something that keeps track of them, within the state. Something, like I said, where it's embossed, it has a seal, something that authenticates it. There is some things you can do with electronic documents, for authentication purposes. Whatever the avenue is, we'd want the states to adopt something and then have it uniform. As a former statey, I know this one's tough because it's administration costs, it's more employees, they may balk at it, but at the same time, if you tell them through their state highway officials, this is where the DMV being separate from the DOT could help in this argument. It's to protect the infrastructure, it's to protect the motoring public. You want these surveys to be real and not something somebody crafted up or plagiarized or stole from somebody else. You want them to be authentic, and you want someone to be able to stand by them. And not have somebody told to the state that they did it and they didn't do it, and then they find themselves in a lawsuit. That would be absolutely horrible. Next issue is the move over protection clause. It seems like the pilot car industry is the only industry with yellow lights out on the roadway that's not protected by move over clause. So what we would ask the state officials to do is maybe take it back and enhance their existing language for move overs. Give it a lane. If we're shouldered up with a load, there's a breakdown, something happens, permit issues, rerouting, what have you. We're out there flagging and we're trying to keep traffic away from the load to where the public has to move over and give us a lane, similar to law enforcement, ambulances, fire. Wreckers have this protection in some state. Construction workers definitely have it. I just see us as a moving construction zone in some respects, so I think we should be afforded the same thing. We have the vests, we have everything just like a construction worker. They're stationary, moving on, working on a project. We're moving down the road, and sometimes the two shall meet. We won't get into that. We don't have a recommendation on what to do through construction zones yet. Stay tuned, something's coming. Another idea for additional safety for us out on the roadway is, you've gone down the road and you've seen these changeable message signs, and sometimes it blocks a high load. I totally get that. But anyway, you come into an urban area, and sometimes in a rural area where you're trying to get through a mountain pass, there's a changeable message sign. We think that if the folks that are in these command centers, if you go into the most recent one I went to is Utah State Traffic Operations Center. There's a wall of cameras. They're watching their system. They see an oversized load. There should be some sign that goes on there for any traffic behind. Just caution, oversized load ahead. Just another thing to put out there, just for a little bit more added safety, so people know when they come up on it that's there. So that pretty much wraps it up. As Elton said in the beginning, we have a couple others in queue that takes a little bit more vetting for the board to chew on and to vet out and completely agree to. I think there's two right now. One has to do with routing and having known, color-coded routes in each state. And I think there's a couple others that still need some work to be worked on before we can go public with them and approach the states with them. We all have to get on the same page. So, with that, I guess I'll yield it back to Elton for questions and see if there's anything folks want to add or kind of put on our, on the wish list for the board to consider.
Thank you.
Yep.
So first question is, go ahead.
Hi. Question for you. As you was mentioning, newly minted Greenhorn pilot cars. Is there any way the board can put this out there for members of the National Pilot or North America Pilot Car Association? For anyone that wants to do the high pole, the broomstick in the air?
Yeah.
That another member can say, hey, I'm willing to train someone, we can work together.
Sure. Yeah.
And do that, because my husband, he's coming off the road next month for a pilot car.
Okay.
And he's gonna be doing the high pole, but he doesn't have any training.
Right.
And I'm not equipped to train.
Okay.
So is that something we can consider, perhaps?
Yeah, what you're talking about is a mentoring program.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a trainer now with the company he works, he drives for. But he doesn't have
Sure.
that, he knows that's,
So he's been watching the high pole because he's driving high loads.
no, he's a trainer. When people graduate from technical college and they start working for the company, he works for PTL, He actually trains them on how to live on the road and not have an accident. He's on
Okay.
the Bible now, teaching somebody how not to have an accident on black ice.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the second option, if I can make one more.
Sure.
The certification class here in Georgia, South Georgia, in Adel, is taught by retired Georgia State Patrol Cooper Lawson Taylor. We did not know about National Pilot Car until we got an email from Mr. Steve Barnes, bless his heart. I did not know that it existed until we got an email from him. And that's
Yeah,
what we started
and
today.
no, it's understood, and we're in our infancy. I mean, I think we've been around, maybe 6 to 9 months, so
Okay.
we're brand new. There's other associations out there, but we're, recognized by SCNRA, and SCNRA has its pilot car task force, and it's my understanding that they kind of want the two to kind of blend together and take off, because there's issues where we're going to be at odds with SCNRA.
Mhm.
And so it makes it difficult for them sometimes to vet those issues. Payment, for example, if one of their members fails to pay one of us, that can be a contentious issue. But you ask yourself, is that an association issue or contract issue? So things like that. I think they want. They feel the pilot cars should be represented exclusively instead of as a subcategory to the carrier.
There was no mention of any type of association. It's like, okay, you're certified, send your paperwork off to the state of Georgia, put a light on the top of your fuel box on top of your car and take off.
Right, right. And then the issue happens in Washington State, and then all of a sudden, there's recommendations that, we've got to totally overhaul this. So that's part of why the association is getting started, is that there is going to be national policy. There's a national study going on right now to overhaul it. So one of the things the association wants to do is make sure that we have a collective voice in that discussion. Otherwise, we're going to be handed something by a bunch of policymakers that have never done this work. And we wouldn't want that, And so I think that's where the ride-along program that Elton was talking about would help, is actually put them out there with us so that they can see what's going on.
Thank you.
Yep, not a problem. Thank you.
What other questions do we have? Sir?
I got one for you. I'm surprised you brought it a D sign, just blew me away.
Correct.
We got a lot of people up in Canada who don't know what that means. Honestly, I'd like to, and now if we start talking, the D sign is required east of Quebec. Quebec requires no signs. If you're not oversized, you don't have an oversized load sign in Quebec. The other ones all accept an oversized load sign everywhere in Canada, with the exception of the East Coast. So, and when you start talking about the signs, I keep a sign for a truck. If he needs my sign, he buys it. Like I bill him for that. I don't have any problem carrying anything for the truck driver that he requires, because a lot of times, as a trucker myself for years, I know we can't carry it.
Yep.
So I always carry it, but I bill him for it.
Right,
And if I get a pylon ruined when it's out, I bill them for it.
right.
And if they use my sign, I bill them for it.
Yeah, and maybe that's fine, that each pilot has its choice of whether or not they want to carry that as an extra. It should be that option to you instead of a requirement.
Well, the biggest thing is with truckers, it's like I've seen this where I've had to use my sign. It's the biggest thing I find with trucker, and big one myself, is that we don't want the load detained because he don't have a sign. He's gonna sit there and say, hold on, I gotta go up to DA and get a sign.
Mhm.
How much time are we gonna be delayed?
Oh, sure.
I'd rather put a sign on, personally.
Sure,
That's
sure.
my thinking.
But it should be your choice instead of requiring you.
Well, it's nice to bill them for it too, because I always bill them more than what I paid for the sign.
There's also an issue with a lot of companies where somebody will fly in and take over a truck that's not fully equipped, so.
Yeah, you never
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, when you're swapping out a head unit, sure. I mean, there's several instances I can think of where it'd be beneficial to have it, but I think that would just be something that the pilot could do to set his or her company apart from maybe their competition, is that they have it and that because they know of these situations. But to have a state say, you have to have it, you don't have it, the load's properly equipped, everybody's ready to go, but you don't
You
have
don't have
extras,
it.
you can't roll.
Well, it's
Think in
nowhere,
New York,
nowhere in
but-
Canada do you have to cross the scale with pilot car.
Yep,
Nowhere. You might go over the scale, a lot of scales will go over because it's a wide load and we don't want to tear off the window.
right.
But no way do we run over any scales in Canada.
Our Mounties don't wanna get out of their hot seat, they just wanna see if we're compliant, so they make us
Just
drive
see
by.
if- See if you're doing the right thing at the right time.
That's my understanding of the issue, is the Mounties just wanna look out the window, and Mounties,
That's
for
it.
those that don't know.
You're clear, sir. That's it.
Yeah, they just wanna look, you know, eat their donut.
And then they wanna see if you have the indoor.
So it's not a weighing issue, because when they first
No.
brought this attention, to my attention as a board member, you know, because I come from the trucking side as well as working for the states trying to connect them to the trucking industry. It's like, what, pilot's not over 10,000 pounds unless he's selling a shitload of signs, right? I mean, you know, so in the lower 48, you shouldn't go over the scale purely for the fact that you're not over 10. They can't
That's right.
require you based on weight, but I guess they can require you because you're a part of the detail. There's a lot of back and forth on this issue about the pilots and the trucks, you know, under Chapter 348 of the Federal Code. It's like, you can't go without me, you know, but then some are saying, well, then the pilots should be subjected to the hours of service limitations of the driver. You know, if you're part of that detail, then you only get 11 hours out of 14 and you gotta rack 10. I mean, there's people that want that too.
They were trying to push that for quite a few years. That was the same.
I think with the regulations that are coming out and fatigue, it's inevitable.
Well,
I think
talking to the people up in Canada, when they said it would just be a nightmare for them.
right.
Because then, now they got anyone with a pickup, if they're gonna bring that law, then it's gonna be for a pickup. If it's a half ton or not.
Right.
It's,
Right.
it's interesting to see some of the things, how you're proposing them.
Hmm?
And it's like I said, especially the one I laughed about most was the diesel.
Yeah.
It's because you talk to a lot of people out there, they don't even know what it means.
Right. Well, and I think the thought was that when it was suggested to the
Uniform.
board was, you know, at night when you've got the yellow ambers flashing, you can't, the yellow sign's not even visible. You know, whether it says oversized load, whether it says this, whether it says roll tide for Alabama, it doesn't matter. I mean, it basically washes it out. So it was the thought of something that stands out, that separates it from something